record, share screen. And yeah, what I'm looking at right here on the screen, it's the notes.py file. Inside that file, there's this delete HTML function. And the idea of this delete HTML function, again, is that we're finding these HTML tags and replacing them with empty text, with blank text inside this function. Very similar to the idea of the functions in your project, except that instead of finding HTML tags, you'll be finding things like stars or underscores or the various markdown elements and replacing them with the HTML tags here. So we're not going to be actually doing that same exact thing here, but we're following, all of your code will follow this same basic pattern. Last time we talked about the possibility of using this replace function to do this. But the downside of the replace function is that you'd have to list all possibilities of things. And we don't know all possibilities in advance. And so we're switching over to this accumulator pattern, which is the generic pattern, which will work for any possible situation where you have a string or a list and you're trying to remove elements from it in some particular pattern. And so all of your functions that you're implementing on the project will follow, you can implement them all using this accumulator pattern. The idea of the accumulator pattern, again, is the same whether you're with lists or strings. You always start with like somehow what is the most empty of the type that you have. So for strings, it would be the empty string. For lists, it's the empty list. Another way to think about it is that you always start with the falsy thing of whatever you're working on. The empty string is the falsy thing. The empty list is the falsy thing. And then we loop over all of the things that we're looking at. And we have some sort of if statement inside here, which we didn't actually implement yet. And we only add to the accumulator if the if statement is true. Otherwise, we do nothing, and then we'll return this accumulator at the end. So here, we're only adding to the accumulator if we're not inside of an HTML tag. So all the stuff that's not inside of an HTML tag, like this and this, we want to add. The stuff that's between the greater than sign and the less than sign, we don't want to add. Any questions about this problem setup before we finish implementing it real quick? Okay, again, this file is the notes.py file on GitHub. And after we finish this up here, I'll upload it to GitHub so you can see, you can have the finished copy of this if you would like it. So here, if we are inside of the HTML tag, what I want to do is, we know we're inside of the HTML tag. What I mean by that is that we're between the less than sign and the greater than sign. And here, if I'm at this B and I'm looking just at the B by itself, there's no way for me to know whether this B is inside of it or less or outside of it, because it could be like this B right here and this B right here. In order to know if I'm inside of it or outside of it, I'm going to create a new variable, a Boolean variable that I'll call inside HTML tag. Nice descriptive name like this. And this is always, the goal of this is this will be true after a less than sign and false after a greater than sign. Or another way to say that is that it will be true when we're in the HTML tag and false when outside of it. And so the if statement that I want right here is if inside HTML tag equals false, then we'll add to the accumulator. And if it's true, then we won't add to the accumulator. So that's I would say that's the semantics, that's the meaning behind what this variable is trying to do. And notice that, like, I tried to make the name of this variable pretty descriptive, that if you just looked at this variable name, you might be able to guess that, like, this is sort of what it means without reading this big comment right here, because that's kind of contained in this name right here. And getting into a good practice of naming variables is sort of like an art, something that after months and months or years and years, you sort of develop a good sense for variable names. But trying to make them as helpful for you as possible is a good thing to do. Any questions so far? Okay, Then the last thing, the only thing that's left here is that I have to somehow actually make this follow the semantic meaning that I want it to have. Right now, it starts off as false all the time. I need to change it so that it will have the right semantic meanings. And so C is the character that I'm looking at any individual moment in this for loop. And so I can say if C equals the less than sign, then I know I'm going to now start to be inside of the HTML tag. That's sort of what I wrote up here. So if we're inside if we have this less than sign, then I'll say inside HTML tag will be true, like that. And then similarly, if C equals the greater than sign, inside HTML tag equals false. So we'll somehow be turning on and off our accumulator pattern right here, turning it on and off based on whether we see this less than sign or this greater than sign. And then we don't have to know what's in between the less than and greater than sign at all. We're just going to, this will work no matter what's inside of them or not. So let's go ahead and save that. Come down here and let's try it out, see how successful or not successful we are. Come down here, up arrow, move my cursor in between the Python 3 and this notes.py-m doc test like so, hit enter. And you see that I'm still getting a bunch of failures. Still, everything is failing. And so I thought this was gonna work, but it turns out it's not working. So I'm gonna look at the test cases down here and try to figure out why it's not working, try to find a pattern in these test cases down here to see what's wrong. So here, if I look, so here's the expected, and here's the output. I can see that it looks like it's removing some HTML tags. Like it says, this is strong, italic, and the strong is not here anymore. And in fact, all of this stuff got removed, but the greater than sign right here didn't get removed. It's keeping around the greater than sign, not discarding all of this. And if I look at some of these other outputs too, okay, it looks like we have the same pattern here, that it's keeping around the greater than sign, getting rid of everything else. And similarly, yep, so this is basically for all the situations, it's keeping around this greater than sign and getting rid of everything else. So now I have to think about how can I fix it so that it's not going to keep the greater than sign. First, I'm going to think about why is it keeping the greater than sign. And so if the current character happens to be the greater than sign, then it's going to immediately set inside HTML tag equals false right here. And then down here, it'll have this check to see if it's false, then we'll add it. So if it's the greater than sign, we set it to be equal to false. So we know it is equal to false, and so we know we're going to add it. And so there's a number of ways that I can try to fix what's going on here so that it doesn't add the greater than sign. And again, all of these are equivalent. It doesn't matter what you do on your homework assignment, however you get something to work. But the first thing I'll think about is that if C is not equal to the greater than sign, and we're still inside of an HTML tag, then we'll add this accumulator. So it's sort of like the most direct possible fix of I know we're doing this line when it's a greater than sign and I don't want to do this line. So let's just add a condition right here saying that you can't do this line if it's the greater than sign. Save that, come down here, up arrow, rerun it, and things are passing. So that is one possible solution. I'm gonna comment that out so that we can still see it, but then change back to our previous solution right here and see a potentially different solution that's potentially simpler depending on your standpoint. So here, my first idea was just to directly say you can't do this if there's a greater than sign. The other possibility is that, okay, if I have a greater than sign already like this, then I just want to move that down here. Oops. After we do this, so that I only ever say that we're not inside the HTML tag after we do this accumulating. And now this will only get set equal to false after we've already checked the accumulator check right here. And if I save that again, come down here, up arrow, that also fixes it and makes it work. Personally, I find this one a little bit simpler because it's a little bit less code, but it's also a little bit more subtle about why things are working the way they are. Having an explicit check inside this if statement right here would be something that other experienced programmers might prefer. And so it's sort of a purely stylistic thing, whether you like having a more complicated if statement with a simpler structure of where the if statements are, or whether you prefer simpler if statements with a more complicated structure of where things go. But yeah, again, for all of your problems on the project, they can all be implemented with this pattern of an accumulator, some sort of tag like here, so that you know whether you're inside or outside of the thing that you're currently looking for, of the markdown code that you're currently looking for. And then in your for loop, you'll have some if statement doing the actual accumulation that looks like this, and then other if statements telling you whether you're inside or outside of the tag, and what goes inside those if statements will be potentially more complicated than this. But this is the same pattern to use for all the functions. Any questions about any of that? Okay. I'll go ahead and stop the recording here. This will be uploaded to YouTube if you want to check it out.